what the fuck is this? So this is a guide for you to be able to make your Vampire the Masquerade character easily, right? So you don't have to read this entire fucking book. We're gonna be playing, from what I have understood and what I've talked to Victor about, a game based on California generally, San Francisco more specifically at some point. But you can be, I guess, from anywhere within California. I don't know. Ask Victor. We're gonna be playing the 20th anniversary edition of Vampire the Masquerade. This doesn't mean there have been 20 editions before this. This just means that this was the one that they came out with in the 20th anniversary of the tabletop game as a whole. First of all, vampires, there was allegedly a Cain and an Abel. They were brothers, the children of Adam and Eve, biblical stuff, right? Essentially, Cain killed his brother and was a vampire. Stuff happened, right? And Cain was the father of all vampires, the first vampire ever, whatever. And he had kids, and those kids gave birth to each and every clan, right? The clans are essentially your class or your race. What is a vampire? In Vampire, the players assume the persona of a vampire, the immortal bloodsuckers of the horror genre. Now, there are certain things that are taken to be true in this specific game, and certain things that are not. Vampires are immortal. Yes, they are. They can die, but they won't die of aging. Vampires are living dead and must sustain themselves with the blood of the living. Yes, indeed. Don't have a pulse, don't breathe, cold as fuck, can't eat, will puke it out if they do eat. Anyone who dies from a vampire bite rises to become a vampire. False. In order to become a vampire, you have to be embraced. It's a little bit of a more complicated process that we'll get to later. Vampires are monsters, demonic spirits embodied in corpses. Some of them, maybe arguably most of them, but that's why we have humanity and self-control in our character sheet, and we can choose to follow the path of humanity or not. Vampires are burdened by sunlight. Yes, some vampires are way more sensitive to light itself, and some vampires can even walk in certain hours of the day without much consequence. It's a single type of vampire that's been whittled down so much that they're barely even a vampire anymore. They're called thin bloods. Vampires are repulsed by garlic and running water. No, not really. They're not repulsed by garlic any more than they are by any other mortal food. Running water, that's just silly. Vampires are repulsed by crosses and other holy symbols. Not really. However, if whoever is wielding the symbol has great faith in the power it represents, then the vampire may suffer some damage by the brandishing of this symbol. But mostly, humans don't believe in that shit anymore, so don't worry about it. Vampires die from a stake through the heart. Conceivably. Not really. False. If you're very damaged and you get staked, you're probably gonna die, or will not die, but go into torpor. It's a whole thing. I'll explain it later. Vampires have strength of 10 men. They can command wolves and bats. They can hypnotize the living and heal even the most grievous of wounds. Potentially. Not all of them. Very unlikely that a single vampire would have all of those powers at once. Then vampires have sex. Yes, they do. Some do it to feed. But they don't really engage in that because of, sex drive or anything like that. They don't have that anymore. But because the feeding, it's even greater pleasure than a sex would be to a vampire. Now, the embrace. Vampires are created through a process called the embrace. Some vampire clans embrace more casually than others, but the embrace is almost never given lightly. After all, any new vampire is a potential competitor for food and power. Then the embrace is similar to normal vampire feeding, as the vampire drains her chosen prey of blood. However, upon complete exsanguination, must be completely drained of their blood, the vampire returns a bit of her blood to the mortal, creating a new vampire. There is such a thing as ghouls, right? You could potentially feed your blood to a human and make them bonded to you and have a fraction of your power. The nocturnal world of the vampire. Vampires value power for its own sake and for the security it brings, and they find it ridiculously easy to acquire mundane goods, riches, and influence. A mesmerizing glance and a few words provide a cunning vampire with access to all the wealth, power, and servants he could desire. Some powerful vampires are capable of implanting post-hypnotic suggestions or commands in mortals' minds. then causing the mortal to forget the vampire's presence, right? That's the way in which vampires have survived, by controlling mortal institutions such as the church or politicians. And then the jihad. Some vampires seek to have nothing to do with their kind, choosing instead to exist and hunt in solitude. However, the civilization of the undead is a manipulative and poisonous dance, and few vampires are left entirely untouched. Since the Knights of the Antiquity, Knights have struggled for supremacy in an ancient and many-layered struggle known as the Jihad. Leaders, cultures, nations, and armies have all been pawns in the secret war, and vampiric conspiracies have influenced much, though by no means all, of humans' history. Vampire elders command from the shadows, manipulating mortals and other vampires alike, and the elders are often manipulated in turn. Indeed, most combatants may not even realize for whom they fight or why. Those skyscrapers take the place of castles, machine guns, and missiles replace swords and torches, and stock portfolios substituted for vaults of gold. The game remains the same. Kindred battles kindred, clan battles clan, sect battles sect, as they have for eons. Increasingly, vampires speak of the Gehenna, the long prophesied night of apocalypse, when the most ancient vampires, the mythical antediluvians, will rise from their hidden lairs and devour all the young vampires. This Gehenna, so kindred say, will presage the end of the world, as vampires and mortals alike are consumed in an inexorable tide of blood. Some vampires strive to prevent Gehenna, some fatalistically await it, and still others consider it a myth. Those who believe in Gehenna, however, insist that the end time comes soon. You're gonna hear 3 different sects. A sect is a vampire political and philosophical affiliation. Is ostensibly a matter of choice. If a Knight dwells in Sabbat city, however, she's almost certainly a Sabbat member, whether she wants to be or not. And vampire in the Camarilla held city had better have exquisite explanation if he chooses not to honor the word of the prince. Each sect has a dogma and an objective its members seek to attain. Being broadly distributed organizations populated by creatures as selfish as vampires makes a sect's nature in each city a unique thing. Some sects dominate cities might be paragons of their organization's virtues, while the other pay only lip service to sect creeds. Okay, so the Camarilla. What the fuck is the Camarilla? The Camarilla hold up traditions as the highest authority, with a figure known as the Prince acting as the ultimate authority to both interpret and enforce those laws in each domain. Of course, the social hierarchy of the Camarilla is an elaborate construct, and vicious interpersonal politics and ancient grudges shape the nightly affairs of the Ivory Tower. Now, the Camarilla are those who might believe in the Gehenna and want to prevent Gehenna. The Sabbat holds an apocalyptic outlook, believing that the time for the Gehenna is nigh, and the ancients will soon rise from their graves and devour their errant get. It has little regard for the traditions other than immediate self-preservation, and its domains are hellish urban war zones where people may well have seen vampire activity, but simply chalk it up to the weirdness and horror of the world of darkness. Then the Anarch Movement is localized and sporadic, without any real central organization outside the individual cities where it established itself. In fact, the Camarilla considers the Anarchs under its own purview. The central tenet of the Anarch is that rule by elders is an outmoded concept, and the kindred domains should be governed by merit, with a fundamental respect for the individual kindred. Okay, whatever ideology your vampire or your sire subscribe to, we'll find that out later. Your character would most likely not have a clue of the Cain myth or any of the sects, how many clans there are, what the fuck they do. Your character's not gonna know shit. So if you don't fully understand or you don't want to read about, it's fine. It's literally fine. We'll figure it out. My character's most likely gonna serve as a guide. I've made him specifically to be a bruiser, to be able to deal a lot of damage, to be able to have a lot of self-control and a lot of humanity, and to have a lot of knowledge. Okay, that's what my character is for. Then here you can see the Camarilla authority is called the Prince, the Sabbat authority is called the Archbishop, and the Anarch authority is called a Baron. These are the traditions, right? There are a few tenets that vampires follow, specifically those under the Camarilla. Most vampires would be conscious of all of this, but not all of them will follow. The first tradition, and the one that gives the game its name, is the Masquerade. This is the most important tradition, for its observance protects the race of Cain from discovery by a mortal world that would unite against them in fear and hatred. Many princes and other kindred authorities spent a great deal of time using their influence or wealth to cover up breaches of the Masquerade for the greater good of the damned, who may not even understand the peril in which they place themselves when they breach the Masquerade. What might be a breach of the Masquerade? Feeding in front of other mortals, letting mortals see you if you are perhaps a Nosferatu. Nosferatu would need to use their powers in order to not be seen or be seen as somebody else. But if somebody sees them in their true form, that would be a breach of the Masquerade. Very dangerous. Domain. Of all the traditions, princes often employ the widest range of interpretations when it comes to the second. To domain. The Masquerade, the domain, the progeny, the accounting, hospitality, and destruction. Generations. I just want to let you know about the generations, because you're going to have to decide on what generation you want to be. This will make a lot more sense when we are looking at the character sheet, but essentially the generation in-game, like mechanically, dictates your blood pool, right? How many blood points you have and how many you can spend per turn. Blood points may be spent for use of a certain ability, so you want to have a lot of blood points, but it's not necessary to have that much, and it's also not necessary for you to be able to use more than a single blood point per turn. Older generations are closer to Cain and have more of Cain's blood flowing within them than younger generations. I believe the standard generation is 13. And then if you wanted to be a older generation than that, then you would have to spend points in the generation background to reflect that. We're not gonna get into it right now. There are other beings, though. There are hunters, there are werewolves, there are sorcerers, there are a lot of things. Ghosts, stuff, right? And there are a lot of words that euphemisms that vampires use for stuff. You can read all about them in the page 34 to 35. Now, the clans, right? Each clan has their own culture, their own way of doing things, their own way of maybe picking who's gonna be the next child or the next vampire they create. There are a lot of different clans. I'm gonna send you a video right after this one so you can know what powers each clan has and what their whole deal is. Because explaining all of that off the top of my head is not gonna be an option. This is the video, by the way. I'll send it to you guys. Let's hop right on to the character sheet portion of this. And I'm gonna be sharing my guy, who you're gonna be playing with. In here, you have a breakdown of the character sheet, every single thing that you may have doubts about within the character sheet. It's explained in detail here. I will do that for you though, because reading is boring. At the top of our character sheet, we have the name of the character, your name. My real name is Iria, by the way. The Chronicle is just what the campaigns are called in Vampire the Masquerade. We don't have a name for the Chronicle yet, I believe, so don't worry about that. The nature of your character is what they truly are, and the demeanor of your character is who they portray themselves as. Page 87 is where you're gonna find the natures and demeanors. These are your choices. You pick whichever one you want, and that may give you an advantage. My character's nature is being a caregiver. So that would mean that I regain a point of willpower whenever I succeed in protecting or nurturing someone else. And it's mostly role-playing focused, okay? Don't think about min-maxing and being efficient. Just think about what type of character you'd like to play and what represents them. The concept can be literally anything. It's just a description. You can be like, I want to play as a version of Dumbledore that's a fucking vampire. So you write over here, vampire Dumbledore. Okay? You can do whatever the fuck you want. In here, it's just a concept, that rough sketch, a guideline that you set for yourself. Leave it empty if you feel like it, okay? The clan, very fucking important. This is not dictated by who you want to be or who you are. This is dictated by who created you. And in my case, I just like the abilities that La Sombra have, even though I really do not fuck with their personality and their whole political ideals. I personally made Samuel a 10th generation vampire, but for that, again, like I said before, I had to pick the generation background and pick 3 dots to represent that. Like I said, the standard is 13th generation. If you don't want to fucking be an older generation, don't do that. You don't have to pick the generation background. You can just be 13th generation. You write it down right there and it's done. Then your sire. Your sire is who created you. It dictates your bloodline and who you're tied to and your relationship with them depending on your clan. Right, like I said, some clans, like the Bruja, just fucking bite people and made them vampires and leave them to fucking figure it out by themselves. Some people, like La Sombra sires, they like to test the people. They think that their bloodline is like too prestigious to simply give away to anybody, and they want to pick targets that are, amount to, in their eyes, to more than a mortal's life. Now that we've dealt with all of that, attributes. Attributes define your character's inborn aptitudes. Every attribute is gonna start at 1 dot. Each dot represents a dice. For example, if I want to punch somebody, I would have to roll, okay, I have 3 in strength, so 3 dice. D10 is what we use for Vampire the Masquerade. 3d10 and brawl 2. So in total, I have a pool of 5 dice. But essentially, you're gonna have it says it at the bottom. It says it, fuck me, at the bottom of the page here of my specific character sheet. Maybe on yours it won't. I don't know. But yeah, it says attributes. You get 7, 5, and 3. This means that from here, we say, okay, what would my character be best at? Physically, socially, or mentally? For my character, for Samuel, I think that his strong suit would be mental. My primary skill set is mental. So I'm gonna distribute 7 points in mental. My secondary skill would be social. So what I'm gonna do is distribute 5 in social. And then my tertiary would be physical, which I'm gonna take the 3 dots and put them in physical. Once you've assigned what you want to prioritize, what your character would be best at, then you're gonna go ahead and distribute the dots however you like. Keep in mind, it's a scale. The ones that the character sheet has, for starters, do not count. You have those for free. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have distributed my 7. Then I think my character would be best at manipulation, but they wouldn't be very good at charisma. This means that they may be... You can see that there's something sketchy about them, but since they have 3 dots in appearance, you want to maybe buy them a drink. You know what I mean? This doesn't need to make... Again, I didn't put any fucking dots in charisma, and I put 3 in manipulation. This doesn't need to make sense. You don't need to try to optimize every single placement of the dots or whatever the fuck. Now, since in my tertiary I had picked physical, I have 3 dots to distribute. So I put 2 in strength and 1 in stamina. Not very dexterous, my guy, but he's clumsy, okay? Same thing with abilities. Except abilities do not have a dot from the jump, okay? Abilities are like this. you're not gonna have any of these given abilities. If you do not have any dot in an ability, that means you cannot attempt to do that. For example, if I didn't have any dots at drive, that means I don't have a license. I cannot drive a car. So you have, for abilities, 13, 9, and 5. For my character, for Samuel, I prioritized knowledge. And he's a medical student, so I prioritized medicine, science, and academics. What I took at my second priority was talents. Again, this is all to reflect what your character is, and it can go hand in hand, meaning I decided to make him a little bit more athletic in the character sheet process. And so I said, well, maybe he likes playing softball or baseball and spend his life with sports as a hobby. I put 3 dots in athletics, I put 1 dot in awareness, 2 in brawl, 2 in empathy, and 1 in intimidation. Now, let's say I want to threaten somebody. Hey, my guy, I think it's best for you if you don't fuck with me. Okay? That might mean a manipulation plus intimidation roll, for which I would roll 5 die because I have 4 dots in manipulation, 1 die in intimidation. Does that make sense? That's the way your character sheet would work in-game. Now I chose to give skills the 5 dots to distribute, and I picked drive, which means he can drive. That's the thing he could do. Not very well, though. Very unlikely that I'm gonna succeed at a drive. But if in any case, I could be the one to do that. Then 2 in etiquette, because he was raised in a very strict household. So I chose to give him 2 etiquette, which means he's been to a few formal events. He knows how to behave. Then I gave him 1 stealth, just in case, and 1 survival, also just in case. Then advantages. What is this? Your disciplines are dictated by your clan. My clan, the La Sombra, have Dominate, Obtenebration, and Potence. Dominate means manipulating others' minds. Obtenebration means manipulating shadows. And Potence means supernatural strength. You can absolutely go ahead and put 3 dots in 1 and leave these empty. Okay, you can be very good at Dominate, very good at manipulation, and you'll have 3 different powers in this domination discipline. However, I personally chose to put 1 in each. The backgrounds. You have a whole entire list of backgrounds that you can pick. What does this mean to have a background or another? Essentially, my backgrounds are generation. Sire is a 9th generation, therefore he is 10th. As I explained earlier, I had to pick the generation background for that, to reflect that, and put 3 dots in it to get to 10. Then the mentor. That means my sire is an ancilla, semi-old. She's at least 100, and she would have already knowledge of the vampire society and some place or network or power within it, albeit of minor importance. Then resources. What these means is that how much money you have. I picked 1, which would mean I am able to pay rent and have a lifestyle such as any working class people would. For backgrounds, you have 5 dots to distribute. That's why I have 3 in here and 2 in here. But you can have 1 and pick 5 different backgrounds, and you can have 1 background and put 5 dots in them. The virtues. You have 7 points to distribute in your virtues. Again, like with attributes, you have 1 point in each, and then you distribute the 7 however you'd like. I put 4 here, 2 here, and 1 here. I feel like my character would be able to control himself very much so. Keep in mind, you get 3 dots for discipline, 5 dots for background, and 7 dots for virtue that you place however you'd like. Now, backgrounds are in page 110. And as always, you have a breakdown here. So for example, in technology, if you have 1 dot in technology, it means you can perform simple modifications or repairs. If you have 2 dots, you could make your living in assembly or repair. If you have 3 dots, you can design new technologies from a set of objective requirements. For For you, it's not can this be done, but how can this be done, etc. You have an interpretation in character for each and every placement of dots that you make. Now the backgrounds. You have allies, alternative identity, Bloodhound membership, domain, which is like, do you own property, and is it recognized by vampires as your haven? Contacts, it's the typical I know a guy. Then fame, generation, herd is do you have humans at your disposal that you can feed on? Influence, mentor, merits and flaws are a whole thing. Essentially, you can exchange weakness for improving some specific ability, and that has a certain cost, each ability. I'm not gonna get into that right now. Humanity. Your humanity is your conscience plus your self-control. 2 in conscience, 5 in self-control, which would mean I have a total of 7 points of humanity, which is gonna come in very handy. Willpower. Your willpower is your courage score. I believe, I don't know why I marked 3 here. If it is just your courage, I'm not sure. Then the blood pool is determined by your generation. You can look that up. You can look up 13th generation blood pool, and in this case, I don't have these blood pools, these points of blood. No, I have everyone I haven't marked, okay? I have 13, and whenever I use a blood pool, a blood point, I might do that, right? Blood per turn. These means that I can spend 1 blood point per turn to maybe activate an ability or whatever the case might be. Your health. This is not as complicated as it sounds, okay? Here's the thing. There are 3 different types of damage. If I took 1 superficial, it would look like that. If I took then 1 aggravated, it would look like that, and it would push the superficial here. That would mean that I am now hurt, and I have a penalty of -1 to any dice roll. Okay? If I then go on to take 3 lethal damage, that would mean that goes here, right? That goes here. That goes here. I am now at 3 lethal, and remember I had 1 aggravated and 1 superficial, which would mean I am now at a mauled stage, and I am now at a -2 penalty. Once you eventually keep pushing that down more and more, you get to incapacitated. Once you get there, you get to torpor. Written like that. Torpor means that you go into like a coma, essentially. Vampires already do not have a pulse. Anybody would assume you're dead. Any mortal would assume you're dead, but you're not, okay? You're just under a coma. Eventually you could come back. You're not permanently dead. However, if whoever damages you beyond torpor, then you've met the true death. Weakness is also dictated by your clan. In my case, my weakness is that my clan does not have a reflection. The La Sombra, not only can they not be reflected in mirrors, but they can also not be reflected or like taken pictures of in any electronic device. If you tried to take a picture of Samuel, he would appear like a blur. If somebody's taking a selfie on the street and I appear in the background like a blur, that might be justifiable. However, if someone looks into a mirror besides me and does not see me, that would be a breach of the masquerade, because they would know I'm some kind of supernatural stuff. I could still get away with it. They don't know I'm a vampire yet. They might assume so, but I could always, try to manipulate them into forgetting. You have a number of freebie points. You have 15. Now that doesn't mean I can put a dot wherever the fuck I please, okay? No. Each separate section of the character sheet has a different cost. Attributes, you spend 5 freebie points per dot in attribute. Ability, you spend 2 per dot. Discipline, 7 per dot. Background, 1 per dot. Virtue, 2, so on, so forth. go ahead and look up this chart if you feel like it. White Wolf Fandom Wiki Freebie Point. Okay. Now, what I did with my freebie points, I went ahead and added a point in stamina, which is -5. Now I have 10 freebie points left. Then I took 1 in expression, which expression is like, how well can you articulate? With 1 point in expression, that means you can write eloquently, more so than a high schooler. You don't excel at it, but you can express yourself. I'm now at 7 spent, with intimidation, 9 spent. Okay, this means I have 6 points left. So if I intimidate plus manipulation, 6 dice, very likely that I'm gonna succeed. Politics, I took 1 more in politics. You know, it's just, you gotta be diplomatic in vampire society to a certain extent. So that is -2. I have now spent 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I have 4 points left. Now, with those 4 points, I spent 1 in background and took the domain, which means we now have a house, a small residence, or a commercial spot, right? That can serve as our haven, a safe place for us, which are a group of characters, a group of vampires that band together with a certain purpose and are like associates, is called a coterie. Okay? Coterie, I believe it's how it's spelled. Anyways, and I took 1 more encourage, just to be safe. So that would mean I have 1 more here, because I took 1 more encourage, and then I spent 1 more here. So that means I have now went from 3 willpower to 5, which is decent. So that's what freebie points are for, to kind of round down your character, make it make a little bit more sense. And this is where you are gonna be at the start of the game. Experience points will then be able to be spent to improve your character, right? Maybe taking 1 more dot in discipline costs 10 experience points. So once we've acquired experience points, we're gonna be able to then spend them to improve the character. That is how you make a fucking character sheet in Vampire the Masquerade. Hope this was helpful. If you have any questions at all, let me know. I'm gonna send a link to the 20th anniversary edition book, which there you can find all the info you would want and more. I'm gonna send a link to the freebie point chart and the clan's explanation. But again, feel free to call me whenever, message me whenever, talk to Victor, and yeah.